This is Labyrinth. It is a semi-modular synthesizer that dares to stray from what you'd usually expect from the House of Moog, and in doing so, it manages to be one of the brand's most interesting instruments in recent memory. More than just a sound design tool, the Labyrinth's secret sauce lies within its two 8-step sequencers, and the unique way that it approaches experimentation in rhythm and melody, but we'll get into that just in a bit. In this video, I want to tell you what I think about Labyrinth beyond the spec sheet, from a real user's perspective, and show you how I've been using it these past few weeks to actually make music. Please know that even though Moog sent me Labyrinth for review, no money changed hands and the opinions in this video are completely my own. If you're already subscribed, huge welcome back, my friend. If this is your first time here, hi, welcome to the Midlight Synthesist. Let's get started. Labyrinth is the 6th child of the Moog semi-modular family, and since there are already several videos out there that have explained the Labyrinth's technical aspects in detail, I'll instead focus on what makes it stand out compared to its siblings. Chapter 1. To capture lightning in a bottle. Even though it has some cool sound design tricks up its sleeve, which we'll get into, the heart and soul of Labyrinth truly lies within its sequencer. Usually, sequencers are a perk, an afterthought even, when they come built into a synth. To put it bluntly, the sequencer on the Labyrinth is the Labyrinth. You have two 8-step sequencers that can be used independently or chained together to create a 16-step sequence. Both sequences can be set to independent lengths, and they can be quantized to one of 16 different scales to keep the randomness reined in when using the Labyrinth melodically. Both sequencers feature a corrupt knob, which, depending on what the position of it is, will begin activating or deactivating different steps and changing CV values to generate different notes in the sequence. To the right of each sequencer, you have a CV range knob, which will set the range of notes available on your sequence. It's basically a musical slots machine, where you don't always win, but things can be rigged, so you make sure that the jackpot is hit more easily and more often. Contrast to the subharmonicon before it, where in my review at least I said that I had to dig through a lot of mud to get to the gold nuggets, I found that the Labyrinth is a much more generous musical companion. As far as actually making music with the Labyrinth goes, the best way that I can describe it is controlled chaos. It feels like you can always guide the Labyrinth in a certain direction, but you can never fully tame it, and that makes for one heck of a musical wildcard. Trying too hard to make it bend to your will can result in frustration, so instead I found that when I stopped trying to control it and just embrace its particular brand of generative sequencing, it started taking me to places that I never dreamed of. My happiest accident so far is a song that I made that started out with a simple Labyrinth sequence, and then I started building up bass and drums and vocals around it. And then I just started live tweaking and performing on it. And I did multiple runs on the same loop, always changing something up. And then I started layering one on top of the other. And well, here's the result.
Safe inside these walls. The walls of my illusion will keep us here together. As we crawl in this labyrinth of mine, you will never find me
the rhythms and the melodies that I get from it will be more often than not inspiring and will push me forward instead of holding me back or frustrating me. Now, when I first started using it, it kind of seemed labyrinthian. Sorry about that. It kind of seemed a bit complicated and a bit intimidating, but I'm very happy to report that, at least in lots of very cool ways, this is nothing like that. And it kind of reminds me a lot of the O Coast in that sense, because just like the O Coast, you can just have lots of fun exploring the textures, and it doesn't take long before you figure out what combination of knobs gives you what kinds of sounds. I do highly suggest when working with Labyrinth to start off your track with the ideas that it'll throw at you and start building your music around it, rather than trying to fit it into an already established song. At least when you're just starting to get to know it, and especially when you're using it melodically. I say this mostly because you can't control the exact notes being played in the sequence. Bound to run into a few moments here and there where the sequence is almost perfect except for just one note, which unfortunately you can't alter without risking the corruption of the rest of the whole melody. You can't transpose the entire sequence with an external controller though. That being said though, what makes this sequencer shine, in my opinion, is not the fact that it can generate sequences. There are plenty of sequencers and group boxes out there that already do that. What I really enjoyed was the way you can live perform the sequencer, thanks to the envelope generator trig mixer to the right. And that has allowed me to do a little performance trick, you might say, which is I start off by blending these two, but I can use this as my fixed or main sequence, and I can mainly play around corrupting the second one. Let me explain. So, right now, we're mostly hearing sequence number 1. Then I can go like for a little interlude with sequence number 2. Jam it out. And then, get a little bit of a delay. And then I can go fully into sequence 1 and just corrupt the living bejesus out of sequence number 2. Remember, up until noon, this thing only corrupts notes, and if you go past noon, it starts corrupting rhythm steps. And after we've done a little bit of this, then we can go back into our main sequence. Results may vary, of course, but more often than not, I would find myself making incredibly dynamic and interesting sequences while jamming on this thing. The problem with this kind of strictly generative sequence, of course, is that it's nearly impossible to recreate a sequence after you corrupt it, though you can save up to one pattern on the internal buffer. So when you power off, then the sequence is going to be right where you left it, and that in itself I think is very, very powerful for something this random, because at least you have a starting point. The biggest takeaway here is, as soon as you turn on your Labyrinth, make sure you start recording, because you want to make sure you save those happy accidents for later. Chapter 2. A Moog of its own. There are a couple of sound design features on the Labyrinth that you don't normally expect on a Moog. First is the wave folder and its bias knob. An easy way to understand a wave folder is that it does pretty much the opposite of what a filter does. Filters take out harmonic frequencies, while wave folders take the highest and lowest points of the sound wave and fold them into themselves, adding in harmonic frequencies that weren't there before. And it's a good thing too, because if not for the wave folder, the filter wouldn't have much to work with, being fed a pure sine wave. As it is, the wave folder on the Labyrinth can turn that well-behaved sine wave into a pretty gnarly growl if you give it enough juice. I'm particularly impressed with how smooth and gradual the change happens as well. In other wave folders out there, with very little movement, you might immediately get a huge change that's very sudden or extreme, and then no perceivable change for a good chunk of the rest of the knob's turn. While in this wave folder, the change is pretty much gradual and constant throughout the entire range of the movement, making it more predictable and manageable. The Labyrinth also comes equipped with a variable state filter that goes from low pass to bandpass, and unlike other Moog filters before it, this does not lose low end when you crank up the resonance. Chapter 3. Not all is amazing. While I do believe that the Labyrinth is a bold and mostly successful venture outside of the norm for Moog, it is not without its downsides. Tuning the oscillators, for example, can take a while, and I can't help but feel that some sort of fine-tuning mechanism would have been really helpful to make the process more streamlined. Also, though I do get that the whole premise of the sequencers is the fact that they are uncompromisingly random, it still would have been amazing to have some way to correct or dial in a particular note on a step when you just needed that one tiny detail to make it perfect. You can already dial in which steps, or bits as they call them, are active or not, so it doesn't feel like it would have been much of a stretch. Though not a deal breaker, that was probably my biggest complaint on the Labyrinth. Finally, I really wish we could have been able to save more sequences directly on the machine. Imagine being able to save up, for example, 16 patterns that you could recall using the sequencer steps. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still pretty easy to find something you like when you start playing around with the corrupt knobs, but it would have been amazing to have more available preset songs or starting points for building up, especially in a live set. As it stands, the Labyrinth is a mighty tool for live performing. It is a musical sandbox where experimentation and taking chances is highly encouraged, often with expressive and unique results. I've had a blast playing it, and I can see it easily filling in the role of musical wildcard in a live hardware synth setup. Now I just need to get my hands on a subharmonicon again, because I have a feeling that these two really play off each other really well. Anyway, those are just my thoughts on the Moog Labyrinth. Have you played it? What do you think about it? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd really love to know your take on this thing. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful, or at least entertaining. Have a great week. See you next time.